Are there things that we can do to improve in the put away process to minimize, any kind of bottlenecks and ensure, efficient storage and that we're getting, the most out of the warehouse that we have, the warehouse space we have?
Yeah, so that's interesting, and it's an often overlooked part of your warehouse operations is the put
Mhm.
away. Like everybody knows you got to receive stuff and put it away, but and how do you make that a little more efficient? And that is also highly dependent on the type of product you're stocking
Right,
you
right.
know the units of measure that you're stocking, like how you're receiving. Are you receiving pallets? You're receiving individual units, cases. Do you need to break those apart during put away?
Right.
All of those things come into play, but there's a few basics that you can kind of keep in mind, right? Um, and again, ideally, you want to pair all of this stuff with the barcode scanning, or RFID isn't not necessarily a bad option
Mhm.
at receiving, right? Because RFID is great for bulk operations, where if I'm receiving 300 lot numbers on a pallet, potentially I can receive that with one scan versus having to break that pallet apart and look for the individual lot numbers. So anyway, from a technology perspective, RFID may be a fit for receiving, depending on what you're receiving. Now, as far as the put away process, there's a few options. Now, speaking specifically within sort of the Business Central world, Business Central does offer you a few different ways that you can, sort of configure your put aways. And what you want to do is figure out what your best practice physical process is, and then configure Business Central to match that.
Mhm.
So when I mentioned earlier about the type of product, for example, foods or chemicals or things like that, where you might need to do a quality inspection, you know, before you put the product in the warehouse, you want to make sure that product is good before you make it available to anybody to use, like to pick.
Mhm.
So you may want to have a two-stage receiving and put away process, right? I receive everything, check it out, make sure it's good, and then I go and put it away. But you may be in an environment where, you've got one person doing receiving and they're not going to receive everything and then go put it, they're going to put the stuff on the shelf as they're recording they've received it. So you could do that as well. So again, some of it is going to depend on the initial, thought process around what your warehouse needs to look like from a layout perspective. Maybe you're receiving everything, and this particular order maybe comes in, everything is pieces. You've got a pick face where you store pieces. Well, I'm just going to put stuff away as I'm receiving it.
Mhm.
Or I'm doing, I receive a lot of stuff in bulk. I'm going to want to put that all in bulk storage. Maybe have the system break that pallet apart during put away, which you can do as well. So that it says, yeah, most of this pallet goes into bulk storage, but some of it goes into picking, or yeah, in the picking area or the warehouse area. And that can be handy because it reduces the number of times you need to touch that product and how far you need to move, because you don't move all the pallet into the bulk storage and then later on do a replenishment into the picking bin. So again, there's a bit of a rambling answer, but putaways are almost a little more, it's a little more to think about almost in some ways than picks. But you
Right.
do have those different ways of doing the putaway, the different processes, and it's going to be highly dependent on what you're receiving and how you want to actually do the put away. But again, the key tenants, you want real-time feedback into the system as to what's going on, ideally, and you want to minimize the amount of movement and the amount of times you touch that product. So you want to choose sort of the physical process that gets as close to those goals as possible, and then configure Business Central to match that physical process.
But I do agree with you 100%, Mark, in that I think everybody focuses more on the pick. Okay, because I've got an order. I'm going to fulfill that order. I'm going to pick that order and I'm going to get it out and it produces this magical thing called an invoice. Hey, hey, revenue, recognize revenue. I like that. And so we're so focused on the order sometime in the picking process to fulfill an order that we don't really think about the receiving process and the efficiency gains that can be had there by doing that and doing that properly, which is going to set you up for success in the pick process.
Exactly. You can't pick if you haven't put it away yet or received it yet. Now,
Right,
I didn't mention the cross-docking as well, because that's another one, right? I mean,
right,
ideally, if you're dealing with a lot of back orders or high volumes or low inventory levels, you're going to want to look at using cross-docking so that when I receive something, I'm not putting it in the warehouse and then the next day generating a pick for it. I want to move it over to the cross-dock area and get it
right.
out the door without having to do that multiple movement and multiple touches of that product.
And within BC, you've got the sales order to PO order kind of match there that you can say, identify, oh, I've received this. It's for this. It's designated for this sales order. Let's cross dock it versus put it away. Save ourselves some time.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few different strategies in Business Central, like there is the cross-docking functionality. If you've, using receipts and shipments and things like that, there's, our order fulfillment worksheet that does a good job of that. There's a number of things you can use to sort of, again, you want to reduce the travel time, reduce the number of times you touch that product.